It was a perfect evening at one of India's most luxurious resorts, nestled in the heart of Udaipur, a city known for its beauty and serenity. But this night was far from ordinary. A young woman, full of life and promise, had checked into the resort with her husband for what seemed like the perfect getaway. However, what started as a dream escape quickly spiraled into a nightmare that no one could have anticipated. Hours later, her lifeless body was found in their locked hotel room. There were no signs of forced entry, and everything seemed undisturbed. Security systems had not been compromised, and no valuables were missing. Yet, the young woman's life had been brutally taken, leaving the authorities and the public stunned. This wasn't a random act of violence. It wasn't an unplanned crime. This was a cold, calculated murder. But who was behind it? Could the man she trusted the most, her own husband, be responsible? Keep watching as we reveal the chilling truth behind this tragedy. The couple arrived at the luxurious five-star resort in Udaipur, India, hoping for a romantic and peaceful getaway. The resort, known for its stunning views, peaceful surroundings, and top-tier service, promised a perfect escape from the stresses of everyday life. Set against the picturesque backdrop of the city's famous lakes and palaces, it was everything anyone could want in a relaxing retreat. The couple was excited to spend time together in this beautiful, serene environment, away from the world's chaos. But what should have been the start of a relaxing weekend quickly turned into a nightmare. The first signs of trouble came when the hotel staff couldn't reach the young woman in her room. They knocked on the door, expecting a response, but there was only silence. Concerned, they called security to check the room. When they opened the door, they found the woman's lifeless body still in the room with no signs of struggle. The room was locked from the inside, and there were no signs of forced entry. Everything appeared undisturbed. The bed was neatly made, and the rest of the room was in order, almost as if nothing had happened. It was as if the tragedy occurred behind closed doors, unseen by anyone. Security systems had not been tampered with, and there were no valuables missing from the room. This presented a chilling question. How could such a horrific event happen in a place that seemed so secure, so peaceful? In a setting where everything appeared perfect, how could someone's life be taken so brutally? The woman's death left everyone in shock and disbelief. How could this happen in a high-end resort, surrounded by luxury and safety? The mystery deepened, and suspicions began to rise. Was this an accident, or something far darker? In the days following the discovery of his wife's body, the husband displayed what appeared to be a devastated public display of grief. He was seen crying, speaking about how much he loved his wife and how the tragedy had shaken him to his core. At first glance, it seemed like a normal reaction for someone who had just lost their partner in such a horrifying way. But as the days passed, police started to notice something unsettling. His grief didn't quite match his actions, and his emotions seemed out of sync with the situation. The investigators began to take a closer look at his behavior. During his police interviews, the husband seemed nervous but overly composed. There were moments when his responses didn't seem genuine, and his body language was not that of someone who had just lost a loved one. This raised suspicion, and the authorities started to question whether he was hiding something. Things took a darker turn when CCTV footage from the resort surfaced. The footage showed the husband walking down the hallway near the room where his wife was found multiple times. At first, it appeared normal. He was just walking down the corridor. But upon further investigation, something didn't add up. The footage showed him pacing back and forth near the door, but he was never seen entering the room. There was no evidence of him going in and out, despite the fact that he had been near the room several times that evening. This strange behavior on the footage raised serious questions. Why was he so close to the room, yet never seen entering? Was he sneaking in and out without anyone noticing, or was there another explanation? It was clear that the footage suggested something more than just an accidental visit. The husband was behaving suspiciously, and his actions were not lining up with the narrative he was presenting. As the investigation unfolded, the authorities began to piece together the inconsistencies in his story. The more they looked into it, the more things didn't seem to add up. The husband had told several conflicting stories about his whereabouts that night, and certain details didn't match the timeline of events. The police also uncovered some troubling information when they examined his phone records. There were several calls made to an unknown number, some of which occurred just hours before the murder. More troubling still were the deleted messages from his phone. It was clear that he had attempted to erase certain communications that might have been crucial to the investigation. What was he trying to hide? Why would he delete these messages if he had nothing to hide? The investigation into the husband's financial situation also began to raise alarm bells. It turned out that he was facing significant financial trouble. The police discovered that he had racked up a large amount of debt and was struggling to make ends meet. What was even more disturbing was that his wife had been set to inherit a significant sum of money. Was the husband motivated by money? Could this have been the real reason for his wife's murder? As the evidence mounted, it became increasingly clear that the husband's involvement in the murder was more than just a possibility. The discrepancies in his behavior, the suspicious phone records, and the financial problems all pointed to a deeper connection between him and the crime. The authorities were now focusing their attention on him as the prime suspect, and the investigation into his role in the murder was just beginning to unfold. As the investigation into the wife's tragic death continued, critical evidence began to emerge that raised serious doubts about the husband's innocence. One of the first pieces of evidence to surface was his phone records. These records revealed troubling details about his actions in the hours leading up to the murder. The police found several calls made to an unknown number, some occurring just before the murder took place. Even more suspicious were the messages that had been deleted from his phone. Why would he go through the trouble of deleting messages if he had nothing to hide? What was he trying to cover up? The investigators dug deeper into the content of these deleted messages, hoping to find something that could provide answers. While they were unable to recover all of the deleted messages, what they did find was enough to raise further questions. The husband's attempts to erase these messages only fueled suspicion, making the authorities believe he was trying to hide something important. Meanwhile, a deeper investigation into the husband's financial situation revealed even more alarming facts. It turned out that the husband had been struggling with significant debts. He was behind on payments for loans and credit cards, and his financial problems were becoming more serious by the day. But what was even more concerning was the discovery that the wife was about to inherit a large sum of money. She had been in the process of signing a will that would make her husband the primary beneficiary of her estate. This inheritance could have been the key to understanding the motive behind the murder. Was it possible that the husband, driven by his mounting debts and his desperate need for money, had planned his wife's death all along? Could her inheritance have been the real reason for the murder? As investigators pieced together the timeline of events, it became increasingly clear that this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment crime. This appeared to be a premeditated act, carefully planned to secure the financial gain the husband so desperately needed. The deeper the authorities looked into the husband's past, the more disturbing the picture became. Witnesses who knew the couple described the husband as controlling and emotionally manipulative. Friends, family, and colleagues all reported that the husband often displayed possessive behavior, and his relationship with his wife was far from perfect. The wife had confided in a few close friends about her struggles in the marriage, explaining how her husband would constantly criticize her and attempt to control her every move. These accounts painted a picture of a man who, rather than being a loving partner, was someone who saw his wife as a means to an end. This wasn't a crime of passion, as some initially suspected. The husband hadn't acted out of anger or frustration in a heated moment. No, this was something much more calculated. It was a murder planned with a specific goal in mind: financial gain. The husband's need for money, combined with his controlling nature, created the perfect storm for this tragedy. As the investigation progressed, more evidence began to point toward a deliberate plan to murder his wife. The deleted phone records, the suspicious calls, and the mounting debts all added up. But perhaps the most telling piece of evidence was the husband's own actions. His attempts to cover up his involvement, his strange behavior during police interviews, and his lack of genuine emotion in the aftermath of the crime all pointed to one thing: the murder had been carefully orchestrated by the husband. The more the investigators uncovered, the more it became clear that this wasn't just an act of violence. This was a cold, calculated murder. The husband had planned the crime to get what he wanted: money. And as the investigation continued, the truth behind the murder became undeniable. This was a case of deception, greed, and betrayal. As the investigation progressed, a chilling theory began to surface. An anonymous tip revealed something unexpected. Just days before the murder, the husband had been discussing life insurance policies with a colleague. The tipster claimed that the husband had been inquiring about a large life insurance policy, one that would benefit him significantly in the event of his wife's death. This was a crucial discovery. The wife had been in the process of signing a new life insurance contract, which would have provided a substantial payout to her husband. The timing of this revelation was eerie. The husband had not only been aware of the upcoming policy, but had also taken an active interest in it. Investigators started to wonder if this life insurance policy could have been the real motive behind the murder. Could the husband have planned to kill his wife to collect the insurance money and clear his mounting debts? As the police dug deeper into the husband's finances, this theory began to make more sense. His debts were increasing, and with the inheritance and life insurance policy, he stood to gain a significant amount of money. It seemed like the perfect, albeit twisted, solution to his financial troubles, but as investigators continued to probe, they uncovered even more troubling leads. There were whispers that the husband had possible connections to a network of criminals. These criminal ties raised suspicions that the murder could have been part of a larger conspiracy. There were reports of shady business dealings, and it became clear that the husband's financial troubles were not just limited to his personal debts. He seemed to be involved in activities that were far from legitimate. Was he working with others who could have helped orchestrate his wife's murder? Could there have been someone else pulling the strings, or was the husband acting alone? Then, the investigation took another strange turn. The resort, where the murder took place, was equipped with state-of-the-art security systems. The hotel had cameras everywhere, and access to guest rooms was tightly controlled. So how did the husband manage to commit such a crime in a room that seemed impossible to access without detection? This question led investigators to consider a chilling possibility: that the husband had somehow tampered with the hotel's security systems to prevent the murder from being detected. The idea that the husband might have manipulated the hotel's systems was a shocking revelation. Investigators soon learned that the husband had been seen near the hotel's maintenance area on the night of the murder. He had spent time in an area that was restricted to guests and staff members. Could he have used his knowledge of the hotel's systems to disable security cameras or alter the room's locks? Was he able to manipulate the resort's state-of-the-art security systems to create the illusion that everything was normal while he carried out the murder? The more investigators uncovered, the clearer it became that the murder may have been part of a much larger scheme. The possibility of an inside job began to emerge. Some believed that the husband may have been working with someone within the hotel itself, perhaps an accomplice who helped him bypass security or cover his tracks. Hotel staff were questioned, and the hotel's security team came under suspicion for failing to detect any unusual activity. Could someone within the resort have helped the husband carry out the crime, either knowingly or unknowingly? As the theory of a conspiracy grew stronger, the complexity of the murder plan began to unfold. The idea that this wasn't just a simple crime of passion or a random act of violence became undeniable. This was a carefully orchestrated act involving manipulation, deception, and possibly a network of people helping the husband cover his tracks. The involvement of hotel staff, the tampering with security systems, and the husband's possible connections to criminal networks pointed to a much deeper plot than anyone had initially realized. The more the investigators uncovered, the more it seemed that the husband's actions were part of a calculated plan to murder his wife for financial gain. But the question remained, was he working alone, or was there a more sinister conspiracy at play? The investigation was just beginning to reveal how far the husband was willing to go to achieve his goal, and the shocking truth behind his wife's murder was starting to take shape. One of the most puzzling pieces of evidence in this case was the locked room where the murder took place. The room was locked from the inside, and there were no signs of forced entry. This raised a major question. How could someone commit such a crime in a room that seemed perfectly secure? The hotel's high-end security systems were supposed to prevent any unauthorized access, so how did the murderer manage to carry out the crime without being detected? The fact that there was no struggle or forced entry made this case even more baffling. To get to the bottom of this, investigators began re-examining the security footage from the hotel. At first, they couldn't find anything suspicious, but after closer inspection, they noticed something strange. The husband was seen entering a utility room, which was off-limits to guests, just hours before the murder occurred. This raised serious questions. What was he doing there? Was he tampering with the hotel's security system to make sure that no one would catch him in the act? The investigators found that the timing of his visit to the utility room was highly suspicious. He spent several minutes in there, and when he emerged, it was just before the murder took place. Could he have been messing with the hotel's security systems during this time? Was he disabling the cameras or altering the locks to make sure his wife's death looked like an accident? As the investigation progressed, a critical piece of evidence was discovered that completely changed the direction of the case. It became clear that the husband had been more involved in tampering with the hotel's security systems than anyone initially realized. The security footage now showed him in various areas of the hotel that were normally off-limits to guests. His actions were beginning to look less like the behavior of a grieving husband and more like that of someone trying to cover his tracks. This discovery led authorities to reconsider their earlier theories. Initially, it had seemed like the crime was an isolated event, with no clear explanation for how the husband could have committed the murder. But with the new evidence of him accessing restricted areas and possibly tampering with the hotel's security systems, it seemed more likely that the husband had planned the murder in advance. He had taken steps to ensure that no one would notice anything unusual until it was too late. The more investigators dug into the details, the clearer it became that the husband had manipulated the hotel's security systems to make sure his crime would go undetected. He had planned the murder carefully, knowing exactly how to bypass the hotel's defenses. The locked room, which seemed like an insurmountable mystery at first, now began to make sense. The husband had controlled the situation from behind the scenes, using his knowledge of the hotel's security systems to conceal his involvement in the crime. With this new information, the investigation took a major turn. What once seemed like an open and shut case of a husband grieving his wife's death now appeared to be a carefully orchestrated murder. The evidence pointed to a man who had gone to great lengths to cover up his crime, tampering with hotel security and manipulating the situation to ensure that he wouldn't be caught. This was no longer a random act of violence. It was a cold, calculated plan to end his wife's life for personal gain. Just when investigators thought they had uncovered all the possible leads in this case, new evidence surfaced that completely changed the direction of the investigation. A new witness came forward with explosive information that would shake everything they thought they knew. The witness, who had been hesitant to come forward before, revealed something that stunned the authorities. According to the witness, they had seen the husband leaving the hotel late at night, just hours after his wife's murder. This wasn't just a casual sighting. It was a critical detail that added a whole new layer to the case. The witness described how the husband appeared to be in a hurry, leaving the hotel at an unusual hour. This was particularly shocking because, up until this point, the husband had claimed to be devastated by his wife's death and had shown no signs of leaving the hotel after the murder. But now, this new testimony suggested something far more sinister. The witness claimed to have seen the husband slipping away in the night, seemingly trying to cover his tracks. What was he doing outside the hotel in the dead of night, just hours after his wife's death? And why did he leave so suddenly? The new witness's testimony was a game changer. It wasn't just the sighting that was important, but what the witness revealed next. They described how the husband seemed to be connected to a criminal network, adding a whole new level of complexity to the case. This wasn't just about a man trying to cover up a murder. Now it seemed like the husband might have been working with others. The web of deception around the husband grew more tangled by the minute, and investigators now had to consider the possibility that this wasn't just an isolated crime. Could the husband have had help? Was he part of a larger conspiracy? The authorities had to dig deeper. They began to consider the possibility that the husband wasn't acting alone in the planning and execution of the crime. As they continued their investigation, they looked into hotel staff and other guests who had been at the resort around the time of the murder. They questioned everyone who might have had any contact with the husband. Could someone from the hotel have helped him stage the crime, or was there an accomplice in the background? The more the investigators uncovered, the clearer it became that the husband's involvement in this murder was not as straightforward as they had originally thought. This new twist in the case forced the investigators to take a step back and reconsider everything they had learned so far. It now seemed as if the husband had planned the murder for much longer than anyone had imagined. The authorities discovered that the husband had been plotting his wife's death for months, carefully studying the layout of the resort and its security systems. He knew the ins and outs of the hotel, which made it easier for him to manipulate the situation when the time came. He had used the resort's systems to help stage the crime, ensuring that no one would suspect anything until it was too late. The more the investigators uncovered, the more they realized that this wasn't a simple crime of passion or a random act of violence. This was a carefully orchestrated murder, planned in advance and executed with chilling precision. The husband had been working in the shadows for months, making sure everything was in place before he carried out his plan. The new witness, with their shocking testimony, had been the key to unraveling the full extent of the husband's involvement in the crime. As the investigation moved forward, the authorities began to question just how deep this conspiracy went. Could the husband have been working with a criminal organization, or was it just a matter of him manipulating those around him to get what he wanted? The more they uncovered, the more it became clear that the husband had orchestrated the entire plot from the beginning. And now, with the new evidence, they had the missing piece that would help bring the truth to light. This new direction in the investigation left everyone on edge. The husband's plan had been more complex than anyone could have imagined. He had thought of every detail, from the resort's security systems to his interactions with other people at the hotel. But now, with the witnesses' testimony, the authorities were one step closer to uncovering the full truth. It wasn't just about the murder anymore. It was about unraveling a twisted conspiracy that had been carefully planned for months. As the investigation continued, it became clear that this case was far from over. The web of deception was growing, and the truth was beginning to surface. The husband S. role in his wife S. death had been much more complicated than anyone had first realized. And with each new piece of evidence, the mystery surrounding the crime became even more disturbing. After months of investigation, the husband was finally arrested. His calm demeanor and the lies he told during the investigation could no longer shield him from the truth. The trial was tense, with every eye in the courtroom fixed on the man accused of orchestrating his wife's brutal murder. But as the trial unfolded, the full extent of his involvement in the crime became clear. What had initially appeared to be a tragic case of domestic violence was slowly revealed to be a far more complex and chilling story. The husband had planned everything carefully, manipulating his wife and others around him to carry out his twisted plot. As the prosecution laid out the evidence, the courtroom was on edge. The details of the husband's actions, his financial problems, his secret life insurance discussions, and the way he manipulated the hotel's security systems came to light. It was clear now that this wasn't just a crime of passion. This was a well-calculated murder, driven by greed and a desire for financial gain. The more the authorities uncovered, the more disturbing the truth became. The real motive behind the murder emerged as the picture of betrayal, greed, and manipulation unfolded. The husband wasn't just trying to escape his debts. He had been planning this for months, using his wife's life as a means to secure a financial future for himself. The witnesses, the phone records, the tampered security systems, all pointed to a man who had no regard for the life of the woman he once claimed to love. It was clear that the murder wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act of rage, but a cold, calculated decision made by someone desperate to escape financial ruin. But the truth behind the murder took an even darker turn. As the investigation continued, it was revealed that the husband wasn't working alone. He had connections to a criminal network that helped him plan and execute the crime. The husband's ties to dangerous people added a shocking twist to the case, turning it from a personal tragedy into something far more sinister. What seemed like a simple murder was now revealed to be part of a much larger conspiracy. The case was not just about the husband's greed. It was about how deep his involvement in criminal activities truly went. As the trial drew to a close, many questions remained unanswered. How many more secrets were hidden in the luxurious resort where this crime took place? What other illegal activities had taken place under the guise of a high-end hotel catering to wealthy guests? The authorities were left wondering if this was just one of many crimes committed in the shadows of a seemingly perfect world. The case may have come to a close, but the investigation into the full extent of the conspiracy was far from over. The trial may have ended, but the mystery surrounding the resort and the criminals who may have helped the husband remained unresolved, leaving everyone to wonder just how many more secrets were still lurking in the dark. The story doesn't end here. There's still so much more to uncover. If you think you know the full truth behind this case, think again. We'll be bringing you even more shocking updates and hidden details that will make you question everything you thought you knew. Stay with us, because the biggest revelations are still to come. Don't miss out on what yes next. There's more to this story than meets the eye.